Hello there, and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and if anyone out there knows how to pitch Nickelodeon a preteen 2D preteen TV show, I am all ears. Please get in touch with me. This episode is with award-winning multi-instrumentalist, composer, arranger, and songwriter Kevin Smithers, who composed the score for the upcoming HBO Mexican stop-motion animation television series, Frankelda. Now, besides Frankelda, Kevin has also worked on Mira, Royal Detective, Victor and Valentina, and Monster Island. And in our chat, Kevin is going to share how he got into composing and songwriting for animation, made the right connections to work on Frankelda, and the ins and outs of what a career in animation music is like. So without further ado, let's jump in. How are you, Kevin? Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hey, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm super interested about your career journey because, you're from Mexico originally, and then you studied in London, and now you're in LA. Is that correct?
Yeah, man. I've been jumping around for many years. I don't even know where I live anymore.
Okay.
Born and raised in Mexico City.
Yeah. Okay. But tell me why. Okay. So did you know you wanted to become a composer, or what would you call yourself to somebody who asks, an uncle comes to the family reunion and they're like, so what are you doing, Kevin, these days? Like,
yeah, I think the most commonly used term is film composer, but I guess a proper term would be media composer. Okay. Because, I do music for film, music for TV, music for video games. I've done music for commercials in the past. So it's really any sort of media that needs music is kind of what I do.
Gotcha. Did you know you wanted to do this from a young age? Like, is that specifically why you went to London?
No, I mean, I knew I wanted to do music. I started playing guitar and started doing, I had my rock band and, I was running around playing gigs and stuff when I was still in Mexico City. And then, I started getting more into jazz and a little bit into classical music, decided I wanted to study music, studied a little bit in Mexico. And then, but I wanted to play guitar, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just wanted to play guitar and write music. And, but I've always been passionate about film and animation. And that was kind of like, that's my passion and this is going to be my job. I never really thought I was going to end up working in the film industry. And then, I got a scholarship to go and study in England, which was awesome. And kind of halfway through my degree, I kind of realized that as much as I love playing jazz and doing session work and doing all that stuff as a guitar player, I kind of wanted to write more music, and I started leaning more towards writing orchestral music and big band stuff. And at some point, I just kind of put two and two together, and I was like, oh man, I can do that, and I can also work in films at the same time under the same job. And that's kind of when I realized that that was my dream job, but it wasn't until I was in college.
So you wanted to be like a rock star at the beginning when you wanted to play just guitar, and then somehow
who doesn't? Yes and no. I mean, I was just kind of having fun playing music, and certainly when I started playing more jazz, I didn't want to be a rock star. That dream went out the window. But yeah, I think my real passion was just making music,
Gotcha.
More than the rock star thing.
So I guess you're well into your career now. How do you feel fulfilled in what you're doing? Looking back to the journey and everything. Yeah.
Oh, of course. I love it, man. Yeah. It's like any career, there's hardships and it's tough when you start out, and that applies to anything you do, I would think. But I freaking love it.
Nice.
I love working in film.
Let's talk about when you started out. So you say I'm listening right now and I want to be a composer for video games or television or film, etc. So you got a degree and then you put together a demo reel, and then you just tell me how you got your first professional gig, somebody to trust that you could be the one to do an amazing job for their thing they're putting money into.
Right. So I think there's two routes for becoming a composer. One is kind of, I'm going to do it on my own, and I'm going to network from the bottom to the top, and I'm going to, create a demo reel and network with people and start making, student films that win awards, and then that'll translate into doing little indie movies that win awards, and that hopefully that'll translate into doing bigger and bigger shows and movies. Obviously, that route is probably the hardest one, because you're on your own and you're just kind of starting from zero and trying to figure out how to get in the door with a market that's very saturated. That's definitely one way. And the second way that I would say is, moving to a place where it's like a hub for composers, like London, like LA, like certainly Toronto has some of that. And then just finding kind of an assistantship or an internship with a composer that's busy enough that needs help. And just spending years with that person, kind of learning the trade by doing it with them, without having the pressure of like, if you screw up, it's on your ass necessarily. And at some point, hopefully that composer will kind of, bring you along to do more things until you can, kind of fly away on your own with kind of an interesting set of credits and hopefully a network,
So let me guess, this latter path is what you chose, what you did?
Man, I kind of did a little bit of in between, because I came to LA like 8-9 years ago, and I did the whole bring coffee to composers and producers and all that stuff, just kind of being a fly in the wall, figuring out how any of this really worked that you don't learn when you're in college.
How do you even, sorry, everybody says like, I did the whole coffee thing. How do you even make a connection to be like, can I bring you coffee? Do you just show up at a studio and be like, hi, I have legs? Like, tell me how, how do you even, because you also said do an internship with a composer, like just one specific person who's like working on stuff and can have somebody sit beside them. Like,
I mean, it's I mean, the way that it worked for me is when I finished studying in London, I got a scholarship to do a master's degree in Spain. At the time, Berklee College of Music from Boston had just opened a campus in Spain for master's degrees, because they didn't have any in Boston. I think they do now. And so I was kind of the guinea pig for their course, me and 19 other students. So I did the film scoring course there, and most of my teachers were from LA, kind of visiting Spain to teach. And they were all kind of very adamant about like, you have to go to LA and do the LA thing and, try it out. So the school sort of helped me out, put me in touch with composers that had like internship programs. And it's crazy because even getting an internship nowadays is hard.
Yeah.
But I found one, and I kind of interned with a composer, and I was lucky that this composer that I was interning for at the time kind of had a big building with other composers in different rooms. So I kind of got to meet a lot of different composers through working with this just one composer, and that kind of trickled down into getting work from other people down the line. And after a little bit of doing that, it just kind of became a thing where I was like half of the time doing work for other composers and half of the time working on my own stuff. So I guess I was sort of in between those two paths that I just mentioned.
That makes sense.
I wasn't like a full-time assistant to anyone, but I also wasn't completely on my own.
Yeah, but you're probably developing, I don't know, I was going to say two strengths twice as fast, but maybe it was two strengths half as fast. Anyways, how did you end up getting your first, paid, hired production is trustworthy of Kevin to take on music, I guess. What was it? How did that happen?
I mean, the very first one, I'm not sure. I think it's all word of mouth, really.
Yeah.
It's always like, I did this, the producer or the director liked it. Everyone was happy at the end of the project. So whenever something comes up, I'll be like, I'm going to recommend my composer because she was good at this. That's kind of how it happens, like 99% of the time. Like, for example, I can't remember what my absolute first film and TV stuff was, but I can tell you what my first video game was, for example. And that is kind of like, I guess, a story that encourages people to be proactive. There was this video game that I did called World War Tombs that sadly got canned by PlayStation at the end of the day. But I reached out to the studio because they had just kind of a few key members from other big studio went the separate routes and created this other video game studio. And I reached out to them and I was like, hey, I love what you guys did here. I know you guys are starting a new venture. I've written all this music in the past that I think is kind of in line with what you guys are doing. I just wanted to send it to you guys and say, I love what you do. And, you know, I must have sent hundreds of those emails, and most of the time you don't even hear back.
Yeah.
But this one, they actually heard it and they loved it. And they invited me for a meeting, and then it went well, and just ended up scoring like 3 or 4 projects with them. And
wow.
That's kind of how it is. You know, you send hundreds of emails or phone calls, and most of them are not going to have the time or won't be interested. But just that one that goes like, "This is cool. Let's get this guy in." You know, that could be your next gig. You know?
Nice. I want to ask you maybe one more question on this. You said that a lot of it is just networking and knowing people. Is there a direct correlation of you having to live where you are, like in LA, to make your career happen? Or because, like, you know, music can happen online or whatever. And I'm assuming, please tell me if I'm wrong, I'm just making this up in my head, that you're working a little bit more solo in creating the music versus like collaboratively as like, I don't know, like a team of animators and storyboarders or whatever it might, like, right. Do you think you could have done what you did and reached out to hundreds of people if you lived, say, still in Mexico or London, or like even in Toronto where I am, and still made it happen?
I think it's I think an argument can be made for both things, but I do think it's tricky to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of what the industry, where the industry is going and what is going on, if you're not based at the place where you want to collaborate. Because let's say I decided to move to Toronto, but most of my clients are in LA. I could kind of go back and forth between LA and Toronto, but the reality is, if like a director calls me up and says, "Hey, Kevin, you know, the last 3 cues that you sent me are kind of not working, because can we meet up and discuss kind of a new direction for the music?" And I'm, you know, all the way on a different part of the country or in a different country, that's going to be challenging. Yeah. And I think some directors, or most directors and producers, would like, you know, their talent to kind of be local or accessible to them, to sort of troubleshoot anything that might need troubleshooting in a, gotcha. You know, easily. I think other than that, you can do the work anywhere. Like, most of my work is being in my cave, you know, in front of a screen, banging away at the keyboard and recording and playing music all day. But I think the human aspect of the creative interactions can be kind of difficult if you're based somewhere else.
Makes sense. So, yeah. So thank you for that answer. Now let's maybe fast forward to Frankelda. So your first job you got from sending 6,000 emails and one person saying yes. How did you end up working on Frankelda, which, you know, is this amazing stop motion production that has been, I feel like I've been following it forever and it's still not out.
It's been a ride. So the Ambris brothers, Bono and Roy, who are the creators of the show, they're the owners of Cinema Fantasma, who's the production company. Yeah. I got introduced to them by a friend in common. At the time, Frankelda wasn't even in their site. They were, and they're still developing a feature film called The Ballad of the Phoenix, which is a feature film in stop motion. Mm-hmm. And they needed to sort of brainstorm kind of what the music, you know, the music world was going to sound like. And a friend of mine kind of spoke very highly of me. He was very sweet to them. And he said, like, "Hey, I think you guys can do something really cool. You guys should go to Kevin." You know, definitely.
Was this a coworker friend who had worked with you professionally, or just a coincidental friend who happened to know them?
Yeah, no, this was a networking thing. This person had did the sound mix for a feature animation film that I did a couple of years before. Okay. He loved what I did with the music, so he was based in Mexico City at the time. Wow. Next time I went to Mexico, he was like, "Hey man, come to the studio, let's chat, because I love what you did." And we became good friends. And because we became good friends and he loved what I did, he recommended me to them. Nice. So more to the point, it's really word of mouth. It's crazy. And you can always see like what trickles down as to how you meet people. It's kind of nuts.
It's
But
almost
yeah,
like the more projects you're involved in, the more opportunities you get aware of, and the more, you know, work you end up
yeah,
getting.
yeah. So I got to them because of that project. And then I think the year later, and they liked what I did. And the year later, Cartoon Network asked them to do like a little pilot short. I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes long of Frankelda. And, you know, that just, it was like a YouTube digital only thing. And people kind of really resonated with it, with that project. And there was like a bunch of fan arts that they got. And, you know, because there's really not that much stuff like that coming out of Mexico, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
people
yeah.
got really excited about it. And I think a few months after that, they called me up and they were like, you know, we just spoke with Cartoon Network and HBO, and they wanna do a series of this thing. And you know, and I didn't score the pilot, by the way. I think that was such a tiny thing that I think they used either library music or they collaborated with like a band that they knew that they were very friendly with, so they kind of helped them out. So I wasn't really involved with the pilot thingy that they did on YouTube. But when they got picked up for a series, they were like, I think we need something more kind of cinematic, kind of like a different scope, because even the tone of the series shifted towards something a little darker and more interesting than what they did with the pilot.
I think that's really cool. Maybe using like Frankelda as kind of the project for this conversation, I guess. So you're brought in early to do some exploratory sound for what the project could look like, and then you're brought in to actually compose for episodes. Is that typical to like be brought in at the start when something's being pitched and to create something?
So yes and no. I know all the time as a composer, especially in live action, I'm so used to being brought, you know, I have a month and a half. We need the music to get done. Everyone's tired. We're running out of money and patience, and we just need someone to get it done.
Oh no, you want to be
You
at the
know,
start when they have lots of money.
right? Well, everyone's just like tired, and they've been on this project for like sometimes years. And you know, even if you're super passionate about a project, sometimes it gets to a point where it's like, I just want this to be out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, and my recommendation for people starting out that are kind of figuring out how to work with composers is figure out who you want to work with before you start animating, before when you have a script and there's something real that's going to happen, maybe starting production, figure out what you can want to, who you want to work with, and start having a conversation early. And this project is a perfect example as to why I recommend that. Because when we started with Frankelda, they had like, you know, they started doing all the arts, and they had the scripts for the episodes, and they called me up, and because I had already done stuff for them, they were like, you're in, we want you to score it, you know. But they said, you know, it's going to take some time to animate, but there's a song in one of the episodes, and it wasn't just a song of like, you know, let's write a song for the sake of a song. It was like a plot point within the script. And they said, like, we want you to do the song, and we need it to animate to, so we're going to need that before we start animating. And I told them, like, I'm more of a composer. I haven't really done much songwriting, at least lately. And they were very adamant, like, we want you to do the song. So I did the song, and funny enough, they liked the song so much that they kind of restructured the whole show, and then they turned it into a part musical where like every episode was going to have a song that was kind of very reminiscent of like kind of like the old school like Disney Renaissance sort of thing. And so now because we worked on that song before they started animating, the whole scope of the show changed. And now I had to write, instead of one, I had to write like 5 or 6 songs for the show before they started animating. And in the process of like working on those 5 or 6 songs, I got to even pitch ideas for the animation when we were like writing the songs. And I would be like, hey, it would be cool if this character would do this, because in the song this is happening, can we make that happen? And they were very receptive to that, and they were like, yeah, that would be awesome, let's do that. And then even more things changed because of that. So the product that we ended up with was so different than what it would have been had they not got someone to work on the music kind of early.
This sounds like a dream project, maybe. But
Man, it was delightful. It was so much fun.
Amazing. But what you're telling me is, you know, like music can be so important to what you're creating. It should just be integrated from the start instead of this like last minute, we need some music put slapped onto this type of thing. And probably, I mean, like, I haven't seen Frankelda. I didn't know what it was before the songs or after it. I'm assuming it's probably enhanced the storytelling and everything just by, integrating the music from the start instead of an afterthought. That's really cool.
Yeah, we'll talk later. I might be able to show a little bit to you after we're done with the interview.
Okay. I mean, okay. Can you enlighten me on kind of what your daily route, like activities are as you're songwriting? Like, you're brought into the pipeline and this project specifically early. And then what does your day look like? You said you're just going away at the keyboard all day, like, or are you, testing out riffs over and over and over again, trying to think of a new chorus? Or do you have like a whole, like, a bag of tricks that you can pull from and just be like, put this here, make it sound a little bit different? I don't know.
Sort of. I mean, so the first thing that you kind of go through is, at least for scoring, for underscore, you kind of do a spotting session of the shows, of the film, of like, you sit down with the filmmakers and you talk about where you want music, what type of music, whatnot. With the songs, it's a little bit different because we didn't have anything to look at other than the art. So it was more of just a general creative brief, where it was like, we want the song to sort of be in this world, and maybe they'll give me a couple of references, and they'll be like, but we want it to be spookier than this. We want it to be more dramatic than this. It needs to last sort of this, it needs to be sort of this length. And then I'll take that and go to the studio. And yeah, just, for me with underscore, it comes a little bit more intuitively because I've done so much of it at this point that, I kind of know what things work and what don't. But there is a moment, especially at the beginning of a project, where it's just kind of experimentation, where you can just like, throw, the kitchen sink to the wall and see what happens, and like do all these weird sounds. And some of it will stick, some of it won't, but you'll have hopefully something different and original that works for the show that is not the same thing you've been doing before.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how you make that happen. How do you find the sound of a show to make it sound original? Like, are you developing like motifs or like, specific moments that are repetitive throughout different episodes to make it sound the same? Because like, when I'm watching animation, sound is something that if it's done really well, it just fits and I'm not thinking about it, I guess, right? Versus.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in Frankelda specifically, the score is super thematic. And what I mean by thematic is like there's very defined melodies for characters or situations that kind of keep coming back in the show. And it's also a very kind of acoustic, organic show. We knew we didn't want like crazy electronics or anything. We wanted to be like kind of a very classic orchestral palette for the score. And then once you start, you just kind of try and find the soul, what makes the show tick. And then you try and translate that musically, which is probably one of the fun parts as a composer, because music is one of the most abstract of the arts. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just either it works or it kind of doesn't. And then you kind of change as you go to make it work, Yeah, there's really no magic formula.
Fair enough. I'm wondering, so you've worked on non-stop motion productions and stop motion productions. Like with stop motion for me, for instance, I will have a shot and I know what has to happen in the shot, but the timing and when it happens is kind of up to so many factors. Like, your puppet is supposed to walk from here to here in the shot, but you realize in stop motion, there's so many restraints that you only get them this way. And then you have to cheat things. So when you get everything finalized, are you creating the music to how the animators ended up timing things? Because I'm just trying to say, like, I would expect you can't really time things too much to a storyboard with stop motion when the puppet might not actually do that thing at the exact moment that you've called for cinematic thing to happen.
Man, that would be a great question for Roy and Bono, because, the actual score was written to picture once they were done animating. So the cuts were locked and I scored the cuts. However, the songs weren't. All the songs were written before any animation was done. And I saw, we were happy with the songs, you know, nailed them, delivered them. And next time I saw them, they were already in the cut and they were perfectly animated to the music.
Gotcha.
So they did it frame by frame. The music stayed the same, and they just animated towards it, and it looked awesome. I don't know how the hell they did it, but they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're brought in typically after everything is finalized, I guess. So like how, but you also said that you were brought in at the start, that you influenced the story. So like, is there a big gap in between you working at the start and then coming in at the end?
Oh yeah, we were in this project for like a year and a half, or more than a year and a half, and it was like a ton of work at the beginning, then a massive like a year gap or something, and then a ton of work at the end.
Oh, wow.
Because we had to work on the songs, have all of those ready, which was a lot of work at the beginning. You know, recording the talent, writing the songs, we recorded some orchestra for the songs, and all that happened at the very beginning. Then they had to actually go and animate the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then at the end,
hopefully.
yeah. And then at the very end, you know, the last weeks before delivery, that was like the scoring section when we sat down, had the spotting session, and wrote all the rest of the score. But because we already had all the songs, there was kind of already like there was some themes in the show, and there was a palette that we were happy with. So it didn't feel like I was starting from zero. It almost felt like I was taking over from where we left off with the songs. So we moved a lot faster than if we had not had that before.
This brings me to another question that I kind of had for you overall, but maybe you'll answer through this. So for this project, you knew you were coming back to do the final score. So you knew you had like a year off to just do whatever you want, or like find a year contract or a 6-month contract or something. How often are you like everything is contract to contract, I'm assuming. What does your year look like then? Like, is it always a scramble to get new work? Is it like, you know, how stable?
I mean, it's kind of, you know, because composers are freelance by nature. Yeah. It's hard to predict exactly how the year is going to look like, but sometimes you'll get, you know, a month or two where things are like super slow, and then you'll get the next 3 months when you're like in 2 projects at the same time and you just have to get everything done, which is hectic. And then you'll have another month where you're like very relaxed, and it's kind of this up and down sort of a thing. Usually projects do overlap a little bit. So when you're working with kind of long projects like this, where it takes like a year and a half to come from like, you know, the moment you sign the contract to the moment you deliver everything, kind of a lot of things happen in between, and it's just kind of like an overarching thing that you're kind of always thinking about, you know, in the back of your head. But yeah, projects have to overlap. There's no other way.
So that means that you're going crazy sometimes.
Yeah, you know, it's part of the job. Sometimes you have to pull a couple of like long nights, but you know, when you love what you do, it's fine.
So you've never been in a situation where a project is ending and a project is starting and you don't have enough time in the day to do both, and you have to make some sacrifices and make some people upset and cry?
No, I mean, that's never happened. I can't imagine if it'll happen. I think a key thing also that people need to understand about composers is that, you know, the idea that there's like a lone composer in a room writing absolutely everything and orchestrating everything and preparing all the parts, is like, it's just impossible. You know, we have teams of people that help us out. You know, if we need to record something with an orchestra and I need to jump on the next cue for the next project, I'll bring in an orchestrator to help me orchestrate what I already wrote, so that the orchestra has parts for the next day while I can work on this other thing, you know?
Oh, wow.
If you need, you know, if you already mapped a cue, but it needs to conform to a new cut that came in, but I also need to deliver this other cue, maybe an assistant will come in and be like, okay, I'll edit the stems while you work on the other cue and save time, you know? So it's like, it's really a team effort that happens, especially with projects when they start overlapping and they're bigger projects. You need a team. You cannot do absolutely everything by yourself.
Gotcha. So, okay. So what kind of like mental or just like skills does it take to make to be a, you know, a well-wanted careerist in composing for film and video games, et cetera? Like, what are some of the skills that keep you getting hired? Like you mentioned, your friend was like work with Kevin. He's great. Like, why do you think they chose you? Like, what are some of those things you've developed that have made you, build your career in this?
Right. I mean, creatively, I think I would love to say, be unique, have a voice, all the corny things that everyone says, but that there is some truth behind it, kind of
That's why everybody says them.
Yeah, yeah. And although that is certainly true, I think there's also an aspect of it where it's like, just be nice. No one wants to work with someone that's like a pain in the butt. You know what I mean? Understand that if you're a composer and you're kind of starting out, understand that making revisions and changes to the music is just part of your job.
Have you ever been in a situation where like, where you're like, this is BS, like what they're asking me to do is ridiculous, like I should just call them out and be like, because you said be nice, right? But what is that in, like, what does that mean, like?
Well, I mean look, the first thing that composers need to understand is that it's not a music video. You know what I mean? It's a joint effort between the DP, the animators, the character modelers, the director, the producer. Like everyone's chiming in to do something, and you're just a part of that. So I do think it's my job that if a director comes to me, be it animation or not, and they said, I want to go from A to B with the music, and I think this is how we should do it. If I think that's not the right way to do it, I think it's my job as a professional composer to be like, we can certainly try that, although let me try this other thing because I think it's going to be more successful to get to the same thing that you're telling me to. And then whether he likes that or not, and we go with this original idea, it's totally up to him. And honestly, I'm happy to do either. It's not my place to be like, this is how the music should sound like, It's his vision. I'm like trying to find musically what his vision is within the scope of the project. So, it's never, sometimes it takes a couple, especially when you work with someone new, sometimes it takes a couple of versions to sort of figure out, what's in someone's headspace. Because music is so abstract. And what, for a perfect example, I was working in this animated feature film a few years ago. And the director kept telling me like, I want like very spooky, like the spooky sound, I think he called it, in this and that part. And to me, what I thought he meant as spooky was like this very low grumbly sound that I had been using. And for him, spooky was like super high pitched.
Like and a theremin or something.
Yeah, it was like a super high, like string sound thing. So to me, the spooky thing was a low rumble, but for him, the spooky thing was a high pitched sound. And it took me, it takes a couple of tries to workshop things and understand what's happening in his head and sort of fix it in the music. But, it's a collaborative effort. And I think most directors, especially good ones, kind of understand that.
Yeah.
So, revisions are part of the job. It's never an issue.
So in my limited experience, I've worked with a couple of composers on some of the projects I've worked on. And I personally find it extremely difficult to explain in words what kind of sounds and music I'm looking for. Even when I'm like searching through sounds and music libraries, I'm like typing in like quirky fun, like just to try to, like, it's so hard to put into words the type of music I want, and partially because you said it's so abstract, right? So are there tips on how to talk about or find or just in you working with directors over years and like communicating what they want and what you can create for them?
Yeah, I mean, the first piece of advice that I would give is 100% it's not your job to talk music. You shouldn't try and go to the composer and tell him what key should be in or what instruments, or you should go to a composer and be like, I want the music to feel this way, I want it to work in this way, the story's about this, I need something that musically represents this, yada yada yada. Okay. And it's the jobs of the composer to take that and be like, okay, I can create this, I can create this, I can create this, what do you think? And see if any of that resonates with you as a director.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to say that is very helpful to do is use temp music, which is a reference. It's like, hey, this score I liked. I didn't like this about the score. I didn't like this, but I did like this and this about the score. And now you have a reference roughly of what he's thinking.
Nice.
be careful with temp, but you know, it could be a very useful tool, especially if you're a little bit lost as to what you want to do.
Gotcha. So next time, like, you know, I'm thinking of making another short film and working with somebody, instead of saying like, you know, I think it'd be great if we start with like this type of noise and we go into this, I should instead say like, I want to feel this way as the story progresses.
I think that's a lot less restrictive as to, you know, kind of letting the composer speak a little bit and have creative freedom with his music, but also kind of being very clear about what the role of the music should be at any given point. So you can say, you know, we start and I want it to be very stuffed and loving. I want the music to not be very busy. And then in this part, I want it to build into like a big moment and it's to be heroic and fun and adventurous. And then at the end, I need to be very sad and kind of understated, maybe not too busy with not a lot of instruments. Okay. You know, that's a great way to approach a composer. And the composer immediately is going to be like, okay, I know exactly where he's going. And if you see the film and the film already speaks to you. So based on what you're seeing in the film and the direction that you gave your composer, that is going to make total sense.
Have you ever been in a situation, well, I guess you described with the high pitch, the low, I was going to say, have you ever been in a situation where like, you know, you're getting feedback, but you're not understanding it. And like, you just keep meeting standstills with what's going on because of the lack of communication between the different arts?
Sometimes it happens, but eventually you always get there. You know, sometimes it takes 1 or 2 tries. Sometimes it takes more than that. You know, usually there's always one problematic cue. That's kind of the cue that you hate, that you know you're going to have to come back and back to. But if I'm honest with you, you know, even though it's more work and it can get tiring to kind of revisit the same music over and over again, you know, I've done the exercise of sitting down at the end of a project when I'm like kind of relaxed and we delivered, everything's kind of feeling happy about it, and watching version 1 of what I did and version whatever it would have been 9, 10, 2 that I did, and 99% of the times the later version is better than what I wrote in version 1. Totally. So even though it's a lot of work, it's you know, you workshop to get to the best version of what that music can be, and it's not just the music being good, but rather how it's working with the film.
Yeah. Just curious, how long does it take to create music for just one episode, like a regular 11-minute or 20-minute episode of a TV show?
So for Frankelda, we were doing kind of an episode a week, sort of a schedule. I've seen, you know, you get the same sort of timeline sometimes for 30-minute episodes.
Wow.
With streaming, sometimes it's a little different. Like for network, you kind of have a because it's airing as you're working, you have a very kind of solid schedule to fall back on. So you know that week you're going to write, it's going to mix, then the next episode is going to come in, and then you're going to write, and it's going to mix, and then the next episode is going to, and by the time you're done the 3rd episode, the first one is already airing. With streaming, that's kind of changed a little bit because you kind of score the whole thing and then the whole thing comes out. So it gives you a little bit of a chance to, you know, if you did something in episode 5 that you were like, oh, this would be a really great thing to bring into episode 1. If it hasn't mixed, you kind of have the option to do that, which is awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about, you know, figuring out what the director wants and what's the right music composition for the things you're working on. Are you also trying to create your own stuff on the side, or are you working towards something different, or?
Yeah, I've not at the moment. I haven't had a ton of time. I started doing a little bit of concert music just for the sake, you know, classical music, just for the sake of like me having an output during the pandemic. I haven't finished it yet, so it's kind of something that's still in the, you know, in progress. But it is something I want to pursue a little bit more in the future. Nice. So no news at the moment, but hopefully soon.
So what does a career as a composer look like? Is it like, you know, is it kind of clear cut where you start as a junior and work your way into like, I don't know, television series and then feature, or is it, like, I don't know, tell me how it goes. Like, what is the next step for you from this point? Because you worked on feature films, you've worked on TV.
I think it's anything. I mean, I think the kind of old school idea of like, you know, film is cool and TV is kind of a stepping stone. I feel like that's kind of antiquated. I feel like a lot of the coolest content is now on TV, streaming, and so I think I don't think it's one's better than the other. There's like slight differences.
Yeah.
But I want to do more film. I want to do more TV. I certainly want to do more video games. That was really fun, even though I haven't done a ton of that lately.
So what is like your dream project, and how would you work towards it, I guess? Or is it just to continue making a career out of this?
I think, well, I mean, there's certainly, goals that I have, people, studios that I would like to work. I would love to work with Disney on something. I would work to do something with Leica. I always been a massive fan of what they do. There's filmmakers creatively that resonate with me. Obviously being Mexican, I would love to work with some Mexican filmmakers, like the usual suspects, Guillermo del Toro, Alfonso Cuarón. I mean, even Patricia Regan, who's like maybe slightly less known director. She's killing it, but for whatever reason, she's a little less known. I would love to work with her. There's people that I would love to work with. I don't know. There's like a particular project that I would be like, it's hard for me to imagine me being in a project that is already musicalized by someone else. You know what I mean? Because the music has so much personality within that project.
Right.
That it's kind of hard. Yeah, it's kind of hard for me. I think, John Powell's score for How to Train Your Dragon, I think it's a masterpiece. I cannot imagine anyone else writing the music for that movie. It's just beyond my comprehension. You know what I mean? So more than a specific project, I would be like, I would love to talk to Leica and see if we can do something in the future, or talk to Guillermo and see if I can do his next movie, or that sort of thing. Have new creative things going on with specific people or studios is what I'm most interested in.
Makes sense. I guess as maybe we're wrapping up, do you have any final advice for people who are pursuing a career in what you've chosen to pursue a career in?
Yeah, I would say, it's kind of a long marathon, so don't get burnt out. Know that it's going to take years, and make sure you're passionate and happy enough doing it for the sake of doing it, because sometimes that's what it takes. Treasure your network. The people that you meet, I try to find the humanity in networking, which is people are not just stepping stones for, a reason or for a career goal, but rather try to connect on a personal level with people. And I've found that the people that really recommend you for things are people that I've kind of found to be friends.
Totally.
So that would be my advice.
Well, nice. Is there anything else you wanted to share that we didn't talk about that you think is important to mention?
Well, just being Mexican, I would say it would be great for Hollywood to look a little bit more representation for Hispanic composers. There's not a lot of A-list composers out there. There's a great resource for people. There's a group called the Composers Diversity Collective, which is a group of us of very diverse backgrounds. We're all composers. So if you are looking into hiring or supporting diverse voices in the film and TV industry, certainly have a look at that.
It's called the Composer Diversity Collective?
Yeah, Composer Diversity Collective. Latinx in animation as well. A lot of Latinas doing amazing work in the animation industry. And, always remember that we can do more than mariachi music,
Well, okay, great words to end off on. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. I love learning about your journey into this, how the whole process works, how I can improve what I'm doing by working with composers maybe a little bit earlier in the pipeline, and what's heading next. I'm super happy we got to chat. Thank you so much.
The pleasure was mine, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And if you're listening and of course you want to check out Frankelda when it comes out from Cinema Fantasma as well, I'll include the links for Composer Diversity Collective and the Latinx in animation. And if you want to follow or get in touch with Kevin, you can do so by checking out his website, which is kevinsmithers.com, or look him up on Instagram, which is Kevin Smithers Music. And that's all for now. All those description, I'll put all those links in the description of this chat, and that's all for now. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.